We're here, Mutant Watch, in the 50 episode special Queer Mutant Wrath, in which we're going to talk about all that we deserve to happen in the comics and all that it has made to us, that it has hurt us, that it has grown on us, that it has made all that shit. So that's what's gonna be today's episodes, and we're gonna have a bunch of guests. You all can see some of them now in the screen, but I will present them as I ask them questions about it. So let's go.
This week on Mutant Watch.
So first of the guests that I'm gonna ask is Carrie Harris, writer of Liberty and Justice for All and other books in the School of X books and other Marvel novels. She's amazing. We already have her a couple of times in the show to talk about various different stuff. And so, Carrie, tell us what is your favorite or more personal headcanon, queer headcanon, and your queer awakening storyline.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me back. It's good to see you. And so I think I've talked about this before, but back in the day, I used to write fan fiction. This was way back before the internet and before it was cool. And I used to write the Kitty and Carrie Chronicles. And Kitty Pryde was my next door neighbor. And we used to get into all kinds of shenanigans together. At the time, I had not realized I was bi. And turns out I had a crush on Kitty Pryde. I didn't just want to be her best friend. And so for the longest time, Kitty was my favorite queer headcanon. I know you can argue she's had her first same-sex kiss on the page, so maybe it's no longer a headcanon, but I still think a lot of it is coded and not explicit. We haven't said it yet. But you cannot watch her with Illyana or with Rachel and deny the fact that she is queer. You cannot see her in her pirate garb with the whole fast and not know that she is queer. So maybe it's kind of adjacent to headcanon. I don't know if I completely check all the boxes, but I'm going to go with it anyway because I like her that much. And now I have caffeine delivery. Thank you. So Kitty is my favorite. She belongs with Illyana. That is the hill I will die on. And I mean, I think that's all there is to say. My favorite queer awakening story is actually one that's kind of complicated because it's the Bobby Drake story. Jean reads his mind. They've traveled through time. Jean reads his mind and tells him that he's gay. When he's talking about how hot Illyana is, right? And that's not cool in a lot of ways. So part of, I think, what I liked about it was that it was not neat, and it made me feel a little more normal about my not neat, journey. But also, the thing that I love the most about Bobby is actually the short story from Marvel Pride with Magneto, and he's at his he's very much in Dad Nito mode, and you see him do that every once in a while where he stops carrying around the weight of the world on his shoulders and actually acts like a person. And you kind of get a glimpse of the fact that maybe Magneto, without the trauma, would be a pretty cool guy. And he has this conversation with Bobby at the pool party where Bobby is watching Angel and having all kinds of feelings. And the two of them just talk, and you get the sense from Magneto that you are okay just as you are. And to get that from Magneto, of all people, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Because he's so judgy. And in this case, he's not. So that story makes me cry every single time I read it. And I've read it a lot of times. So that's my favorite headcanon and my favorite queer awakening. And I'm so glad you had me.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was great. When I talk about mine, I'm gonna pick a little bit here.
Right.
Sir.
Well, I have to apologize in advance because I'm gonna have to run early, but I'll stay for a few, and then I'll just disappear like in a puff of smoke,
That's what's gonna happen today. People are gonna come and go like ghosts.
I actually have a question for Carrie, because you said your favorite queer headcanon is Kitty and how she's meant to be with Illyana. What is your opinion on it being Illyana being the one who planted the seed of doubt that made Kitty drop her wedding to Illyana's brother?
I know.
Feels inherently queer in a way, but also incredibly messy.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a big thing that made me think that there really was something there and not just I wanted there to be something there. Because, I mean, you have to, especially back in the day, you had to look for those things, right? Nothing was ever explicit. And so to have, like, and yes, I loved Kitty and Colossus together. They were delightfully messy from the start. But the fact that it was Illyana who turned her off the whole thing said something to me, and that's part of what I love about it. Maybe I'm too melodramatic. Maybe that's the problem.
That is Illyana doing God's work.
Fair.
It is a very telenovela way to get out of a wedding. Also a very telenovela way for queer couples to get together is, hey, you can't marry my brother.
Yeah.
And then she whispers, I'm in love with you.
That run is so weird because it's so clear that there is a tension between Kitty and Illyana, and they just keep dropping the word sister again and again in every panel, and it's just like, this is not working.
They keep dropping it in every panel, and it's kind of like, who are you trying to convince? Us or you?
Well, especially after they're wrestling, like in their underwear, in a bed, for fun, like you do with your besties.
Nightcrawler and his sister are just sitting there on the sidelines like, that's okay.
Oh my
in
God.
his world, that's totally normal.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask Dorian. Same question. So your queer headcanon, and to present Dorian has written a short comic, I think it was for the NIP, for the NIP, about Mystique's gender fluidity, and they have also written like other stuff on speculating on like gender variants, especially related to works of fiction and Mystique in particular. And I'm such a fan of that strip. I'm such a fan of your work, and I'm really excited to know what's your favorite queer headcanon and what's your queer awakening storyline. Both. I'm really excited.
Thank you. I think my favorite queer headcanon is probably Magneto. I mostly because I think my first interaction with the X-Men was through I think the second movie, like in it was early 2000s or something like that, and the just the elegant flamboyance that Ian McKellen brings to Magneto. It was hard to read or view Magneto as anything but queer, right? He had this just fierce swishiness and just a lot of like sort of queenie sass and throwing shade over at Rogue at one point. So it was just I love that, and to have that attached to such a powerful and radical figure as he was represented in the film did a lot for me, and I immediately went to the library and checked out all the X-Men comics that I could find, mostly on that performance alone. And I think that probably segues right into my favorite queer awakening story, the one that probably impacted me the most, which you might guess it would be Mystique, but I was actually the ultimate version of Peter. Because I had such all the only X-Men comics they had at the library were the Ultimate comics. So I actually read Ultimate X-Men all the way through before I read the actual original comics, and I had such a crush on Nightcrawler as this like roguish sort of mildly sad boy, emo boy through navigating through the school, and his relationship with Colossus was great. And then it was just so heartbreaking when Colossus like comes out to Nightcrawler, and it sort of like breaks their friendship. So I was like sort of very disappointed with the way that they wrote Nightcrawler in that, but I also felt like it was meaningful. It was like realistic in a storyline that could happen, but the way that Colossus then went on to just hold their own and was able to give up that friendship that I had such an attachment to for his own health was very instrumental then in the process of having to give up very important relationships in my own life when I came out and was often met with the same resistance where I grew up. That Colossus just held his ground, and then eventually a few volumes later, going to prom. I think it was with a Knoll, maybe. Could be wrong about that. I might be crossing hairs, but went to prom with somebody and was just very like out and was fine. And it was Nightcrawler that sort of suffered from his own bigotry in that sense. And Colossus went on to live his best life. So that would be my favorite.
That's an amazing choice. The best part of the Ultimate X-Men comics, for sure. And and I'm glad you said Magneto, because I was gonna be so conflicted if nobody said Magneto, and we'll have to just say Magneto myself or something. So I'm really glad to say that, because it's very obviously in his character, in his survivorship, in his relationship with Xavier. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the Ultimate comic line definitely had plenty to not be happy about in its run, but I really do love and appreciate what they did with Colossus. They really took the opportunity they had to do things that at the time they weren't doing or able to do or willing to do in the main comic line. We did get North Star in the main universe as a main member of the X-Men, but he never had the name recognition that Colossus had. And for the Ultimate line to take that and run with it and really run with it. And they gave him a boyfriend, and they gave him as happy a story as you can give in the X-Men. It was definitely something I was glad of at the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I never read the Ultimate X-Men comics because I know I wouldn't like it, but I read one with Ultimate Jessica Drew, and I really liked that as well. I just think there's a lot of like interesting gender stuff there, and it would be great if she could come back into the comics. Um, and I also think it's so funny that she had a crush on Kitty Pryde. Like even in the Ultimate Universe, all the girls love Kitty Pryde.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ask Conor, but before that, I'm also gonna let another person in. Hi, Dylan.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so we're gonna be with Dylan in a moment. I'm gonna ask Conor first. So Conor reads X-Men in Twitter. Oh, I forgot to say Dorian's Twitter is Mutant Rise, and Carrie's Twitter is Carhar. Follow them. But anyway, Conor is doing a project of which I think has a lot of relationship with the Claremont Run project that is also going on Twitter, and he's like working a lot on like of those of the Claremont era of the books and kind of like going through all of that. And as we all know, there's a bunch of subtext over there. Just a bunch. I feel like so cruel asking you for just one headcanon and one awakening storyline, but you can cheat and tell me too if you want to.
I mean, well, hi. I'm so happy to be back. I love coming to talk to you guys about Ileana because that's why I'm here. Arguably, but you're completely right. Like the Claremont Run, it's just everything is at least marginally queer, and then most of the time it's very queer. But I mean, Ileana, hands down, my favorite headcanon, and it's sort of like in dialogue with what Carrie said, but this idea of like, is it still headcanon if it's like so obvious? Like the subtext is like so, like subtext is text, but it's like it's right on the edge. I don't like, outside of there's like an early line in like Hickman Brisson New Mutants where she asks like a female presenting alien, which sure, like if she wants to make out, and it's like, oh cool, that is canonically queer Ileana just wanting to make out. But like I really everything about her relationship with Kitty, like I am very much like a Kitty Ileana, not a Kitty Rachel person.
You can do both.
I can do, well, you can. I'm really happy with what Rachel is doing off with Betsy right now, which is just great stuff. No, but I mean, definitely, Kitty, like their entire relationship in the 80s is like before, and it's weird because it's like all of the times that like Kitty has been straight washed by proxy of like, you're back in a relationship with Piotr, and you know there's the bit in Astonishing where you know she has sex with Colossus and like phases through the bed, and it's like, you know, the first time she did that was with his younger sister in the 80s. So it's like, it's a really validating scene for Ileana that like this is the nature of their relationship, you know, like I don't know, I just, Ileana is hands down my headcanon from the moment in, it's like early New Mutants, like right when she's coming on the book post the Nova Roma stuff. And it opens with like she's in her room and she's doing magic. And like the first line of it is like this, like the best place to do it is like alone in your room. And like that is just so closeted queer just energy to me of like, I can, in this one singular little space, like I get to have my magic. And like, that's just, I just love that so much. My favorite queer awakening, because we haven't actually gotten to see like Yana's awakening really happen. It feels like she was just like born awake. It's got to be Bobby, because I really like the chaos of so many writers trying to drag him out of the closet over decades and decades and decades is that it's like a really, like, that is a real experience of like, I'm getting just close enough to admitting it. I'm getting just close enough to it feeling real. People are telling me to my face, like, sweetie, you're gay and you have to do something about this. And I'm like going back behind the wall. And that is just so, like, that just feels so real, unintentionally. Like the beauty of long form continuity is we've accidentally written like a 5-decade-long story about coming out for this one character that I absolutely love. I can't not bring up the Pride story, because just there's something really wonderful about Erik spinning nukes above his head and going, "Oh, Charles," like, to lower them and just like sit with Bobby. I adore that book. But again, like, that's the same thing of even somebody showing young Bobby like, no, it's okay, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, that's still not being enough. Like, I have such sympathy and such a connection with that experience of being queer. You know, like, how many times that I had like come out in secret to one person and then like recanted before I came out, you know, like, I love that storyline. And like all things, it somehow intersects with Kitty Pride. So yeah.
That was perfect. That was perfect. And I couldn't have explained all the things you said about Ileana better, so I'm glad that you did it. So, yeah, it's our girl. We love her, like, doing magic on her room, just like figuring herself out on who she is. That's who we were. But
I do like that the way you mentioned like Bobby's coming out. At least what I was taking from is you're talking about like grown-up Bobby coming out and that whole process, which is very different than what Carrie was saying, which was the messiness of teenage Bobby coming out.
yes,
And the way they handled it, which is technically the same character, kind of not the same character, but they gave Bobby different coming out stories, and in a way also managed to reclaim his coming out with that Pride issue, where it kind of gave him a little bit more agency than first Jean telling teen Bobby, hey, you're kind of gay, and then teen Bobby telling adult Bobby, how are you not gay? And it really kind of gave Bobby the chance to kind of reclaim it a little bit by kind of having that halfway coming out with Magneto.
yeah, I feel like that story of Bobby and Magneto is amazing, because it puts two characters that are so clearly have been in that point of like not being explicitly but being like really, really like queer, like their experiences are so queer, and Bobby has been made explicit later, like, you know, but like those two characters relate so well because they have so similar stories of like dealing with trauma, and like that getting a little bit on the way of them expressing like their true emotions. Because that's Bobby for like how many years? Astonished in X-Men, and the like everything before Bobby came out is Bobby trying to come out. He literally like made some giant like made some giant Icemen because he was pissed because he couldn't come out because they were all his girlfriends in the door. Like that was wild, and I don't know. I really like that what Anthony did there. Like that's that.
Yeah,
We love
and the
that.
thing about in that story about Iceman coming out to Magneto is that he doesn't like actually like literally come out. Like he doesn't tell Magneto, I am gay and I'm struggling with that. But Magneto gets that he understands what's happening with Bobby, and like it's because he also is gay. And which like you can't say in the issue, but like we know. And so it's just a really good story.
That's I think I have a softer read than a lot of people have on the Jean and the young Bobby story, because I feel the same way with Jean. There's just way too much in her history as an adult, but that she's got to also be queer. But looking at them as kids and her seeing all the damage that Bobby being in the closet did, not only to him, her friend, someone she's known those time, but to all these other people. There are people whose lives have been put at real risk or destroyed because Bobby stayed in the closet. And it's not like she blabs to everybody. She can go and post it on a bulletin board. She didn't go and announce it to everyone in public. She told him, her friend, dude, you're gay. It's probably better, given what we've seen, excuse me, that you accept this about yourself. It might work out better than the future you that we've seen, who's a mess and annoys everyone. The Bobby that she saw, present day Bobby, created those giant icemen. He's almost killed people because he's in the closet. He used to schedule times to go and harass women who lived with him to prove how straight he was. So for me, a teenager making the choice to privately tell another teenager she's friends with, you might want to find a healthier way before you turn into that guy. It doesn't feel as upsetting as I know it was for some readers, or for some people who didn't read it but saw a panel or something on Twitter.
I'm happy you mentioned that, because a lot of people get so angry about Michael Brian Bendis writing that, and the way you worded that is great, because Jean, like Teen Jean, came into this world, saw all the destruction that her older self did, and the reason they were even brought to the future was because of all the wrong things Cyclops was doing. And so she's just trying to be like, don't become the awful adult Iceman that exists here. So I'm happy you mentioned that, because a lot of people don't think of it that way. Like, they were brought there to make their future selves be better.
I'm glad you all brought that up. Whenever I looked at the 05 X-Men coming forward, I was always able to see like, well, Jean kind of is taking it as a cautionary tale. Cyclops is, Beast is, Archangel is. But I never drew the connection with Bobby that he was so far in the closet, he literally caused a global apocalypse almost for a moment. And that coming out is his way of changing that. I've also never been as critical against the Jean telling him story as a lot of other people are. Because for me, you have this character who is so deep in the closet that we have been in his head for narration, and we weren't told that he was queer. So having a telepath who has more power than she has common sense or social norms, picking up on it and then telling him, to me, that makes sense. Because we've had so many telepaths in Bobby's head. And yeah, we've gotten hints that Emma knew, but she didn't say anything. But we've had evil telepaths in Bobby's head. And I don't think like the Shadow King is going to respect his privacy if he was able to uncover that. So to me, it was a very interesting narrative way to get over that, instead of just, we're not going to talk about it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the next person, because we have to go on schedule. So Dylan is the next person I'm gonna ask. It's gonna be Dylan and then Rhayne. Okay, so Dylan, Work Past Dylan on Twitter, part of House of X podcast. We have had House of X in the podcast here. It was great. So we have also had Regina, the other half of House of X for the family, so which was also amazing. And we hope to have both of them, Dylan, Regina, in some future shows, because they're great and we love them. We should listen to them. They review every book that releases every week, so they're much more constant than us and much more like informative. And we're the ones that do the weird queer questions. So either way, let's ask you, what's your favorite queer headcanon of yours and your favorite queer awakening storyline?
So I'm not sure. I've been trying to think of it while everyone was talking. I just think all mutants are queer in some fashion, so I don't really have like an answer. But
here.
Yeah. I feel like more people need to think about Sabretooth as being queer because one, I swear it has nothing to do with my bias of wanting to be with him in some weird, messed up way. But like the exact same reasons that everyone thinks that Wolverine is queer or that we know that he is. He's been around forever. So is Sabretooth. And when Sabretooth becomes like obsessed with like even wanting to kill someone, he like fetishes these people in some sort of sense. So I think it only makes sense that Sabretooth is queer just as much as Wolverine and everyone else.
That definitely puts a different spin on the Sabretooth Wolverine tension that I was not expecting to think about today.
I mean, he becomes so obsessed with people when he wants to kill them that, like, I'm sure he even thinks about sleeping with them or awful ways of sleeping with them that Sabretooth would do. So,
I mean, we have proof of that in Mystique. That's kind of the relationship. So,
yeah, when Sabretooth and Mystique were together, I would not put it past them to, have a lot of fun with a lot of different people.
I know with the Daredevil issue back in the day where he's kidnapping people and keeping them in the sewers, and he's got the one woman for the story, but then there's a whole pile of bodies. One of either the writer or the artist said that they had to change that scene where the bodies are revealed because originally it was women and men, and there was concern from the comics code that this is going to come off as queer. And so of all the things to change, it's like, you can't have a pile of just different gendered bodies. And so it's got to all be women.
I didn't know that. I loved hearing that.
The sexual violence is fine as long as it isn't gay.
Yeah, that's so interesting because like you would think like when gay people are allowed, like you would think like the most like murdery villain, like at least them, but like even that very like negative portrayal of queerness would not be allowed. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And what's your fave queer awakening storyline?
It would be Shatterstar. I say that with like a question mark because for those that know Shatterstar's history and like where he comes from, like where he comes from, I don't really think queer is a bad thing. So I guess it's like Shatterstar / Richter. But when I was little, like my first comics that I really bought and read were X-Force. I knew X-Men existed, but I'm always a person that doesn't like the super awesome popular. I always go for the other. So I liked X-Force more. And growing up reading that, there was always that weird subtext between Richter and Shatterstar forever. And I was like, are they gay? Because it seems like they are, but no one's saying anything. And I was like, and I know I'm gay. I mean, Shatterstar learned Spanish so he could talk to Richter in front of other characters of the team without them knowing what they were talking about, which is really weird because like Spanish is not that hard. Or I mean, it's kind of hard to learn, but like they all lived close to Mexico anyway. So I'm sure half the team knew Spanish anyway. And then like Richter left the team at one point in time and Shatterstar like broke down, like they had broken up. And then eventually, years later, when Shatterstar disappeared for a while and then showed up, and the first thing he did was kiss Richter after trying to kill him, but he was brainwashed. That was just, for me, at the point in time in X Factor when that happened, I had actually had a lot of awfulness in my life, and I had stopped reading comics for a few years. And then I came back to reading books right before Shatterstar returned. And that was actually the same time that I had came out to everyone in my life. And so then like 3 months later, Shatterstar returns, and then they finally have Shatterstar and Richter be a couple. And it was just like, my life seemed like it was all in the right spot at the right time. I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it, but it was just amazing. And I just love that moment so much.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so Rhayne, I'm really excited to know your answers.
Before we jump to Rhayne, I did want to say one thing. What Dylan was talking about.
Yeah, of course.
As
That
anyone
makes
who watches
sense.
the show knows, I am obsessed with Richter. He is my favorite X-Men character of all time, and I'm very glad you brought that up, Dylan, because I actually wasn't planning on bringing up Richter from my favorite Queer Awakening. So now I get to gush and break the rules. In the same way you were, Dylan, the timing of that was impeccable. It was within a year of me coming out, and I had related so much to Richter without really knowing why. Funny how that works. But what you were saying about the X-Force days, and there is a page, and it is the first page of an issue. I can't remember the number, but it is Shatterstar and it is Siren, and they are training, and it is all about how they are both heartbroken because Richter left the team and Warpath left the team, and it is just constant parallels between the two without coming out and saying why Shatterstar is upset that Richter left. And then when they are reunited in X Factor, it is such, to me, a great moment because it's Shatterstar's love for Richter breaking through the brainwashing, and then they kiss, and it's just kind of like this is a thing from the one character who sees it. And I think it is such a nice way to address something that has been subtext for so long just by embracing it and by doing it. Very similar to what we've seen in Excalibur recently, where they just come out with a kiss.
And I love that they Shatterstar and Richter like fight each other before they kiss each other. It just is so like X-Force of them. It's like so emblematic of their relationship because like at first like they didn't like each other, and just like everybody in X-Force always like expresses their feelings through like violence because they're not very well adjusted. So it just is, it feels like very thematically fitting for them. I love that because like there's like after Richter leaves in X-Force, like there's that annual where like he and Shatterstar are like they have like some adventure together, and it's like they do seem like a couple there. But then it's not till much later that like we see them like kiss, and like we know for sure that they're together and they have those feelings for each other. They're very dear to me as well.
In that annual, you have Richter and Shatterstar sharing a room, which I believe only has one bed, and Shatterstar is working out in little booty shorts while Richter is just like, I don't know, watching. They don't really say what he's doing, and like it is so gay.
Yeah, Richter wakes up to like Shatterstar doing
don't
these
know
like
what to-
handstand push-ups. It's very domestic. It's just very sweet. I love that for them.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to leave, but
Oh,
thank you.
bye, Dorian. So great to have you.
Thank you for
I
coming.
also have to
Thank you.
sneak
Oh,
out.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for coming also, Conor. I'll let you know what I talk about later, just so you know it.
We'll come back
Bye.
and watch the rest. But
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Some people go, some people come. Here. Hi.
Hello. I'm early this time.
Yeah, you're early. I'm really excited that you're early.
I'm
Because
sure.
we're gonna start burning fire soon. Anyways, so it was like Rhayne's turn, and I'm really excited. Rhayne has the Twitter page, all the pages of Carefree Black Nerve Carrie on Twitter and other places, and he does like this podcast on representation in media. He talks about like a lot of things like TV shows, comics, and he also has that Smell Like Teen Mutant project about Generation X. We have had Rhayne a bunch of times. You all probably know Rhayne if you're watching this, and I'm really excited to ask what's your favorite queer headcanon and queer awakening storyline because I'm so curious.
It was hard. Like, thank you for even mentioning Sabretooth because that checked him off my list. So I feel so much better because I wanted to discuss him. I have so many, but I will center on Angelo Skin. From Generation X, to me, he has always been queer. That's my head canon, so much so that it's real canon as far as I'm concerned. I take him as queer mainly because in the Marvel universe, he's not the only or the first character with his specific power set, and yet everyone else seems to be so much more well adjusted, and a lot of his earlier visualness is very extreme. Now Generation X of course is like body horror to the extreme, but him specifically with no true love interest throughout the series and not having a handle on his power set for so long, where I personally feel like even when he did get a handle on it later on, it was, and it was going to sound worse than how I intended, but I think it was a little bit more kind of lazy when it comes to the creative teams, because his power set was like, much like Storm's, is directly tied into like his mental state. And so I saw his characterization from beginning to end as like this queer kid in a space with other kids who they were, even Chamber, like visually normal, though they had their own issues, and he was the one who stood out the most and was most fragile. And when it comes to like being that pre-teenage queer kid in a space where it seems like you're the only one, and even if you're the only one with sexuality, there's like the popular girl may have a disorder of some sort of her own, or the jock may have. So where even though you're in this space where like you are hyper focused on what makes you so different, I felt like even with him flirting with Paige and him going to prom with Monet and all, and even his girlfriend from Los Angeles, to me that I rationalized that as like a queer kid who might truly have this attraction to these characters, but and I would even go so far as to say he's bisexual or pan, but the gay aspect to me was always like, look at me, I am this preteen who does not have control over my acne and my body, and it's to the extreme where when he did start to get a little bit more control over it, I felt like that was more or less like coming into your own. Like I could see where me at 13 is a little kind of out of here, but me at 17 or 21, I have more control, so I can control my appearance more. Because he remained gray skinned no matter how they drew him. So that gayness was always there. It was just how he kind of had a handle on it. So that first issue versus like the Massachusetts Academy opened up to all those humans where he just had like a ponytail, it's vastly different. So he's always been queer to me. Always. Yes.
I'm glad that you mentioned his LA girlfriend, Torres, because I forgot she existed. And if you tell me that woman was straight, you are lying.
Hello? Yes. Also very bi. That woman, yeah. She was very, very studly, I'll say. Very, yeah. So, but yeah, no, I truly believe, even with his like road trip with Chamber, I think it was like just a few issues arc, but even that, it's like, also with him being POC, I'm black, clearly. I'm not Latin, so I cannot speak to like all of the cultural nuances that may be with that character. But looking at like a person of color, there are so many queer men that I know in my life and just throughout growing up who are just like the depiction of him. They even come from that particular background in LA. So like there was no way I could separate him from being queer. Like this is definitely Angelo. Yes. Yeah.
I I think the skin thing it's so believable. I've never thought of it until you just now said it, but
Yeah.
Generation X was like, I know X-Force was my first going into it, but Generation X started and I was like, okay, this is my X-Men book that I will read start to finish. And just thinking about it, like he seemed very close to Chamber and even Sync. I mean, even with the Nowadays and Krakoa, like they resurrected Skin to make sure Sync was okay, but like Sync is also there to make sure Skin is okay. So they have this weird bond, and it's like, come on. And all of those kids were like trading partners anyway. Jubilee liked Sync, and then Monet liked Sync, and Husk liked Chamber, and yeah, no, it just makes sense that at least one of those like 7 or 8 kids is queer, and
or all of them.
Yeah, I read one of the they made like these little like mass market paperback novels of Generation X, and in one of them there's like a part where there's a part where Angelo like sort of jokingly flirts with Everett. I was like, there's something there.
Yes.
But I also wonder, like, even like his he has these like friendships with the girls, like with Paige and Jubilee, and I think like there might be something there with him like being very like comfortable like with girls in a way that like Jono is not. I think it also could read as queer.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, I love in that respect him and Jubilee, because she's kind of the first person, the first other student that he's really close to or that he can be safe with. He makes it very clear that they have like a sibling relationship. Like right away lays that down. And when you see him pursue romantic relationships with women, it's girls who are not going to stick around. They're over there, or it's Monet who's it's not going to work out, and he knows it's not going to work out. Anytime he's particularly close to a girl, he establishes a boundary in that respect.
And I would love if they would take that and put it canon, because there's so much story that could be told with Skin that we don't have anywhere else. We have other Latinx queer characters, but the way Angelo specifically interacts with the machismo part of Latinx culture is very distinct to him, and how that interacts with queerness is a story that we don't have in comics and we desperately need.
Yeah, and I think
somehow.
I was just gonna say, and I think because I know a lot of people, straight people get angry and they're like, well, just make a new character instead. Someone like Skin is very similar to Tempo, like we have in Marauders now, where we didn't really know that much about Tempo at all. So you can give her this history that's slightly been hinted at. Skin does not have that much history either. And there's these little bits that you could, if you wanted to, have a flashback and be like, hey, this explains that millisecond of something. So it would be interesting to do that with Skin too.
If I could even go a bit further, and this may feel like a bit of a reach, but I feel like Skin at that time, if we're looking at real continuity, would be about 30 something now, or maybe closer to 40, because he was a teenager in the 90s. And when you look at queer representation on television, it is predominantly white. And I bring that up because of Mr. Fantastic and their power set being so exactly the same. And not to say that Reed is queer, which he's all over the place, but there's also something there where your specific power set is explored in this one character who is, for all intents and purposes, conventionally attractive, head of household, everything that you think about when you think of all-American man. Smart, scientist, handsome, wife, 2.5 kids, nuclear family. And there's this sort of like being a black or brown queer kid back then. And when you do seek out queer media, you see essentially Reed Richards, where it's still like, okay, I see myself in something, but it's not quite the same. And Reed and Angelo, like very vast difference in circumstance and backstory, age, all of that. I'm like, there's something there. And yeah, so Angelo's queer. Oh man.
Yeah, I love the idea that you're explaining of him, like his like messiness with his queer identity and how his like very messy powers reflect that. Because like with Iceman, like there's a similar thing, but like Iceman is white and he's able to his powers aren't like visually, I guess, like unappealing the way that Angelo's are. And so I think that visual depiction of his powers and just like the way that he can never like really conceal them, I think that lends itself to a really interesting story about queerness.
That man gay.
I don't think it's headcanon anymore. I think we've all decided that Skin
Look,
is gay. So
yes.
now you have to pick someone else.
No, yeah, look, I got a list. Stop, because I have a full list. I couldn't decide. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part? The Queer Awakening. Now, I read that totally differently initially. It was like I read it as my Queer Awakening from which character. But to kind of follow the show, I think I'm gonna have to go with everyone else and go with Bobby, because I think that's the one kind of queer awakening story that has been played out on camera, so to speak, where like everyone is privy to. So like all X-Men fans, it's in the X-Men book. It's with one of the original 5 characters. Regardless to how people feel about it, like it's in your face and explicit. Even in that one little panel, you're gay. And I think that even with the fallout behind it, where I think you guys mentioned how like some people really ran with the like Jean being evil by like outing him, but I think that's very indicative of just people coming out in general, where it's, I'll come out already. If you're gonna be with women or be with men, make a decision, this and that, where it's like it's not even a lot of times up to you, the person who is dealing with these feelings. And then even if you feel comfortable enough where, oh, this is me, I'm Bobby, I'm gay, it doesn't need to be said. The very fact that everyone is kind of zeroing in on you and your history, like, oh, you've dated a girl, so, but what does that mean? Does that erase this queerness? So I truly like that story, mainly for and I forget the writer, I'm sorry, of the Iceman series that came after, where he essentially yes, God, okay, thank you. But where he was constantly like coming out, like him and Kitty having that like kind of sort of friendly argument. I was like, that feels so real. And regardless of, and to kind of go back to my previous example with Reed and Angelo, a lot of times as being a Black queer person, when I don't see myself, you just have to see yourself somewhere. But I feel like that story was one that, regardless of like putting the racial aspect into it, like specifically him and Kitty, kind of struck a chord with me, because it's like you're never fully out. You're constantly having to come out to someone, because no matter how many times you do come out, depending on how that person perceives you. Angelo, for example, he may appear traditionally masculine and visually look that way versus like Darnell Shade. So you may get someone, oh, I didn't know you were gay. Well, okay, now I have to come out again, and then I get a new job, I have to come out again. So I like that Bobby like going through that in this action-packed X-Men story, but still having to like, yes, and then now on panel kind of reconcile with his history of what does this mean for the people I've been with before, and how do I explain this over and over again, that though I may have dated women, this is where I am now. So the Bobby story to me felt so real and close to home that, yeah, I have to go with that. I have to go with Bobby.
Everybody's going with Bobby. Okay, so next I'm gonna ask Kat, because I think you're leaving. Hi, Kat, because I think you're leaving. Hello, in like half an hour, and then Sinead. And okay, so Kat, we already had Kat here for the New Mutants, for the classic New Mutants, so which was a blast. And Kat is an amazing feminist writer. She has a Medium that I love, with a couple of articles that I love, and she's also like an activist, a musician, who is in the anti-fascist organization Popular Mobilization on Portland. And that's Kat over there. And I want to ask you, for your favorite queer headcanon and queer awakening storyline. I'm pretty excited about your answer because it's gonna be very similar to mine, I feel.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to see all of your faces. So I'm a very long time X-Men and comics fan, and not someone with a encyclopedic knowledge by any means. And I also I've never quite been part of fandom communities exactly. So I haven't engaged in a lot of a ton of kind of headcanon thinking through things. I tend to sort of read the text, but so I was trying to sort of rack my brain for what are the things that have most stuck with me through my reading. And I think about it in terms of okay, well, first off, who are the characters that are either queer or or that I want to be queer for me specifically. And the answer to that immediately is Tabitha Smith or America Chavez. Obviously, America Chavez, already queer, but those are my two big personal crushes. Tabitha Smith, Boom Boom, just being the most amazing 80s trashy 80s movies, hard femme. I just want her to step on me, basically. When it comes to actual queer, true queer coming out narratives, I know people have talked about Bobby a lot, which obviously is one of the more interestingly handled stories. I really liked how Quentin Quire was handled. I think that there's something really different in it's a new generation of kids being represented, new generation of queer people represented. And he just has this vibe of I'm not going to answer you. You don't need to know everything. Fuck off. I am what I am. Now pardon me while I melt your brain. Right. And I really appreciated his just belligerence as a character in that universe. When it comes to sort of headcanon around stories, I most gravitate towards I mostly gravitate towards sort of trans narratives that I kind of want to read into things, or that I wish for. I've always loved people's X-Men, Wolverine secretly being a trans man. Although I feel
not
that
a secret.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. But stepping back from that one, I've always I've personally, as a trans woman, always related a lot to Rogue and X-23 or Laura Kinney as when I was a kid, my favorite game was Final Fantasy VI. I really vibed with Terra, who is a monster girl, and her whole storyline is just about the horrible feelings of having a weird body, basically. And so I feel there's a lot of that with Laura Kinney and Rogue around this oh, I'm a weapon. I have feelings too, and I'm not sure how to make those two things go together, which I feel maps onto at least a lot of trans feminine people's experiences with their relationship to masculinity and femininity as I want to embrace who I am, and also what I am right now. Everything is bad. Oh God. I had all that in my head, but the thing that the character I'm actually most interested in talking about is Mystique, who I think has been brought up a little bit. But the reason why I'm so intrigued by Mystique is what's missing in the text and what I think's been implied. There's been I know I've read or heard about references to some of the gaps in her continuity. She's obviously showed up all throughout the stories as a sort of femme fatale, Erik, or what is it? Is it Erik the Red? As a Deus Ex Machina, gotcha. Hey, there was this whole storyline, but actually it was Mystique. Suddenly she's revealed to be just this giant babe, femme fatale character, which I love for her. But I also feel there's so much more to that character that hasn't been explored yet. In the kind of detail or granularity that it could be. And I hope that if any X-Men writers stumble across this particular podcast, that they would consider that Mystique is the most perfect literary tool for exploring universal gender euphoria, right? any gender expression that Mystique could find joy in, she can just do it. Just experience that joy. And then we could travel on that path with her. So I really want like a one of those just total aside miniseries like Rogue and Gambit, where it's just like, 5 or 6 issues of Mystique off in history at some point. And I want to see, Destiny is dead for a long ass time. Mystique was doing shit that whole time. I want a secret story where like Mystique went off and lived as like whatever her version, whatever the man version of her that she feels the most like true about. I want to see like what's her like secret family that she raised off in some hidden away place where she had like 5 years of just like being a homebody and like being a dad or something. And I just feel like there's so much untapped potential there for like getting into the sort of like sideways, getting into the sort of like weirdness that we have a culture around gender through the lens of this character who can just be anything and do anything that she wants.
I've never considered that Mystique could be thought of as a deadbeat dad, but now I'm kind of obsessed with that idea.
Yes, because you know that she would be. She would have so many kids, just as many kids as Wolverine, and not want anything to do with them.
Yeah, just a legion of blue kids out there dealing with their feelings because their deadbeat dad is off, I don't know, being a lady spy in all of X-Men canon.
I'm just imagining her only coming back in the child's life shortly enough that she can throw them off a cliff, and then she's gone again.
All of the Atlanteans are blue because they actually come from Mystique. She threw them into the ocean, and they all just became Atlantis people. Mystique is actually the god of Atlantis.
I accept this. Yeah.
Like, Mystique does not need a solid gender. All they need is to solidly be a horrible parent. That is the most consistent thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I really loved how much the more recent narrative around the Krakoan era X-Men, like how much her relationship with Destiny became the sort of like plot point upon which everything sort of twisted, the like hubris of Charles and the whole council, and that we got to see this like their downfall was their hubris in the suppression of queer rage. And it was just like, yes, writers, thank you. We will destroy you if you fuck with us.
I also like that you brought up Boom Boom. I think she's not one that most people like think of as queer, but like in X-Force especially, I feel like she just has like that kind of energy. I don't know, but yeah, I like her.
Boom Boom and Skids are both on panel talking about how hot Jean Grey is. That's the thing that stuck with me from like 1989. That was like cemented in my brain now.
And I mean, she's getting us serious right now with Leah Williams writing.
Yeah, she occupies that place that I think a lot of queer people have of the like be her, fuck her dynamic of like, I am both inspired by the like amazingness of her gender presentation, and I'm also like, maybe I'm gay. Oh no. Oh yeah.
I just think that any girl character who gives herself a buzz cut, like she can't be straight, like realistically.
And with Mystique, I was always kind of disappointed because I think the first Mystique story I ever read is in Wolverine, where she picks up Wolverine and takes him to her hotel room to look at the etchings on her wall. And she's so masculine in that. She picks him up in a bar to go look at the, Velvet Elvis at her hotel or her motel room. And I thought that's how Mystique was. I just thought that's how Mystique does. Like Mystique just rolls into town, picks up somebody at a motel to like, hey, you want to go look at the pictures on my wall? And then Jubilee gets in bed. That's what I thought their dynamic was. And it never happens again. Like the next 20 years of X-Men, I'm waiting for her to be that person. And it never happens. So I would very much like if Mystique from here on, they don't even have to connect it to continuity. Just from here on out, Mystique's gender expression is whatever makes her happy at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think there needs to be a part of the story that you said that you wanted to exist where, like, because of like that issue that he just mentioned of Mystique and Wolverine. And then last year we did get that Christmas Marvel Unlimited story where it showed that Mystique and Wolverine meet each other and get each other Christmas gifts. I need a part of your story to be like Wolverine and Mystique go to bars a lot and pick up people, men and women, and do whatever they want with them. And then they go back to their own lives. Mystique goes back to killing people. Wolverine goes back to the X-Men. I need that to be part of the story as well.
That is an incredibly real, we've been checking you out across the bar and like you're buying a couple right there.
Yes.
Once a year for Christmas. Little Christmas present to themselves.
Yeah.
You can imagine her like rolling up to an Eagle somewhere across the United States and them being like, oh, you don't like this outfit. I see that I am not exactly the clientele. Leather daddy.
Yes.
You know? Right?
Well, I have to go. I wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm glad I stayed for that story, but thank you for having me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really excited for you all to listen to, because my queer awakening one has to do with Mystique, but I'm not. I'm the next one I have to ask Sinead. Sinead, who writes for Women Write About Comics and has done like a couple of articles for us to one on Jesse Drake, Marvel's first gender mutant, and I'm really excited to ask you about your fave headcanon and your storyline. We also had like a bunch of shows with Sinead on them, with having like with Innocenti discussing Jesse Drake, discussing trans characters. You all can go look back. Very special guest. So yeah, what's your favorite queer headcanon and queer awakening storyline?
This is a good question. I've spent so much time trying to figure out what I would say to my favorite queer headcanon, because I feel like some of them are specifically like at this point, I've talked about them so many times. Like the easy one for me to reach for is Emma Frost. Like we know from Grant Morrison's writing, but also Grant Morrison's like meta discussions of their work, that like Emma Frost is like as close to being canonically trans, even just in the Morrison run, as one can get, but before they just start saying I'm trans on the page. And so like there are so many things that we get in terms of glimpses into Emma's early home life. Like she has a kind of like structurally trans narrative too, in terms of like being a character for whom like the performance of gender is sort of like a really conscious effort. Like we've seen that, especially in the Krakoan era, we've seen that like Emma sleeps in just like shorts and an oversized t-shirt. Like we've seen like an Emma that defies the sort of like, we've seen the quote unquote boy mode Emma before on the page now. And so it's interesting to start seeing those things come up and then see this like highly performed Emma Frost where, she is like the archetype of high femme in the X-Men books in some stretches. And yet we're seeing that is in maybe some ways not the way she's most comfortable expressing herself innately, but like is making conscious effort to express herself that way because of the way just because of the types of relational dynamics that it creates with people around her.
She wields femininity as a weapon.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting when they start, like when they put simple panels of her just like in sweatpants or like just going out in you know, like there was one where she's literally just in like boy shorts and like a t-shirt, but she's projecting this like mental image of being like all glammed up, and I was like, wow, there's there's some subtext for you between those two panels. But Emma, I feel like I is like the go-to, and I've been trying to think about other characters that I would not. I mean, I headcanon almost every X-Men character as trans except for Betsy Braddock, because let's be honest, a rich white woman from the UK with her lineage would quite possibly be on the other side of the trans battle in reality, and so she doesn't quite get that grace of being headcanoned as queer. And I mean, now she is queer, so you
Yeah,
know.
and she's dating Rachel of all people.
Yeah,
Which
so
like
you know, the fact that she's dating someone that I do headcanon as trans has endeared me to Betsy Braddock just a little bit. I think my current fixation is non-binary Callisto. Like I've specifically just been going back and been, for something that I'm slowly writing, been rereading a lot of the pages where Callisto has been transformed by Mask. And you know, again, fuck Mask. Mask could be doing so much more for the trans community and instead chooses violence. But just the way that exploration of Callisto's own approach to femininity in general is really hard to separate from the way that like interior narratives of dysphoria kind of function. Like the way that we see her discuss an aversion to femininity is really interesting to me, because like looking at like early parts of my transition, there were times where like anything that felt Mask was something that like caused repulsion in me, and anything that felt too just masculine leaning really it created those types of feelings. And so seeing Callisto play that experience out of like, oh, everyone like sees me as pretty, and I'm like being read as this like beautiful like femme person, and that's not that feels so alien to me. And it's so interesting to read that as like, okay, maybe Callisto is really more of a trans Mask icon than than I had previously thought. And like maybe these are not Callisto just being a hard ass butch, but like Callisto really processing the ideas that like femininity doesn't feel correct or at home for them. And so yeah, I've been on that train a lot lately in terms of just trying to parse out like, you know, Callisto's internalized like anti-fem agenda through what Mask does to Callisto, but also like just the ways that we see Callisto carry themselves like in general is just like super gender transgressive. And I feel like it's an utter disappointment at this point that like we haven't seen someone do more work with that. Like I don't think that Callisto's been in the hands of a writer I trust so far to like really take those steps and really take that work apart. You know, I think if we got Callisto in New Mutants, we would be seeing like a masterclass in deconstructing those things, because I think from what Vita did with Cosmar, who also is my like ride or die trans headcanon, because we know that Vita was exploring those kinds of those narratives of like working through dysphoria, working through just gender feels in general. But yeah, it would be cool to see Cosmar and Callisto in the same space. Cosmar is my like, I will die on this hill that Cosmar is trans. Cosmar, I mean, that story is so explicitly trans and is a really advantageous wielding of the mutant metaphor in ways that handles, yeah, just trans experiences better than I think some of the previous attempts have, and attempts that I've heard were gonna come to light, and thank fucking Christ didn't. but yeah, I think every character is probably trans in that show, or in that those comics. I think queer awakening stories are really interesting because I always have suspicions against the cultural narrative that there are too many coming out stories. When like I hear that sometimes from people. I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like there are too many coming out stories because, like Rhayne said, like you're always coming out. Like I enter a new space, or I enter a space another time, and like if it's new people or a new like relational dynamic in that space, like I'm coming out to people. Like I'm always in a process of coming out, especially as somebody who doesn't pass. Like coming out is like the fundamental nature of my social interactions. Like I either make a choice to compartmentalize in social interactions, or I make a choice to come out to people who don't know me. And so I'm always just like taken back when I hear someone say, I'm really tired of like stories about people coming out. And I'm like, I get that, like we're probably tired of seeing that being like a character's only story arc, where like they are defined by the coming out story and there's nothing else around it. And I think that that's why, folks were talking about Bobby, and I think it's really interesting because like I would never say that like a cis white gay man would be like my top pick for a coming out story, but I do think it's nice when the coming out stories are grounded in like a character whose dimensionality is more fleshed out. And that's why I hate when folks are like, well, just make a new character and make them queer. But like, no, like take somebody make them queer, because that's what everyone's social situation is when they come out. Like people are not just like fully formed 19-year-olds or 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds and then they're like manifested into the world by pure queer energy. Like no, we go through a series of experiences and then we come out. But as we were talking, I was also thinking about this, like the House of X, or sorry, not the House of X, the Inferno storyline, which is like transparently the last time I've read anything going on Krakoa. And it's interesting to think about that not as a coming out story per se, but as like a queer revelation. And something that Kat said really just like, I started to just rapid fire write some stuff down, because framing it as, a moral lesson to neoliberals about ignoring queer rage is really interesting to me now, where it's like, yeah, you throughout so much of Dawn of X, we see Charles, the archetype of the neoliberal within the mutant agenda, and his, radical boyfriend who is just playing along to make Charles happy at this point. Like Magneto is only not throwing missiles at the planet because his boyfriend asked him to. Real nice. And he wants to keep getting the dick, so he's going to keep doing what he has to do. But you see Mystique make so many attempts to appeal to their better nature, and it's really interesting to see that over time as like, the reflection of just whether it's queer, trans, like disability, people of color, like any politicized identity. Like there are always these periods of like, well, we were asking very politely 5 or 10 years ago and you weren't listening then. And so like that really is an interesting frame to put around that story. And I'm so excited that Kat said that, because I'm like fuck, there's an essay there for me all of a sudden. And thinking about that as like a queer revelation story, but the revelation is on the part of the people who are caught in the crossfire or who have catalyzed that situation. Like Mystique didn't, like I firmly believe Mystique did not in any way give them misdirection on her intentions. She asked for her wife back. She kept playing their game, and like it's really interesting to observe Charles and Magneto as making these like neoliberal half measures. Like, okay, we're not gonna quite give you the rights you need or want, but we'll put X gender markers on IDs that are tied into a surveillance state that's going to oppress you anyway, and this will actually give us a better list of who the trans people are by having that X, and like, you know, but it's a thing, and it'll keep you happy for like a few weeks while we completely ignore doing larger scale things to protect you, right? And it's interesting to see like they keep moving the goalposts on Mystique, and Mystique is like warning them the whole time, like, if you don't do this, I am gonna just fuck you up. Like there is no reality in which I don't get this thing, which is like queer love. Like that story is about, you know, the price of withholding queer love from queer people. And yeah, what happens is they learn the hard lesson of like you can push us back and push us aside and try to like, you know, dangle a cookie in front of us every now and then, but like ultimately we are gonna come for blood, and it'll always have been your fault. And like thinking about where like trans politics are right now, I'm thinking about that type of mental space where it's like, yeah, you know, like we were sort of not playing hardball as a collective in 2016. We were playing even less hardball in the early 2000s. But you know, I made the mistake of reading the chat as as I was talking.
Bye,
It's been great to see you
Rhayne.
again. Fuck, I lost my train of thought.
What I was thinking about while you were telling that story, I used to be really involved in trans politics when I was a wee one. I came up 18 years ago in 2004. Yeah, 2004. And I was really involved in trans politics, and at the time I was really involved in politics, like kind of respectability politics. I thought we needed to be nice to people because that's how you get people to join your side. I thought, you know, most vocal opposition was like people who already identified as feminists, like, we can make this work, let's talk about it. And I stepped back after, you know, needing to. There was a whole new generation of trans activists, and they came out and they were just like, no, you're going to give me what I want, or I'm going to light this shit on fire. And I was like, I don't know, guys, this seems like a bad plan. Everything I've learned tells me that maybe that's not how we should approach things. And then I stood back and I watched people achieve things I never even began to dream of. Being able to pay for things like trans healthcare with insurance. That was not even on my radar. I would never have asked for that. I would never have been militant to try and make that happen because it did not exist in the realm of possibility. And then all of these younger folks showed up and were just like, no, the status quo is unacceptable. We're either going to get the rights that we should have access to, or we're going to light shit on fire. And that actually made a lot of really good things happen. So I have, come full circle, and I'm back in the position of, if they won't give you a seat at the table, kick the legs out and light the place on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also really interesting because I have not always been as like hardline anti-assimilationist as I am like in this current moment. Like early in my transition, I was like, yeah, we can work with people, we can make slow advances. And then just like that threw me into doing like a lot of like DEI work, which like the gay for pay industry, the first thing I learned was just like, nobody has any interest in like progress. They have interest in holding you up as a way to entirely placate a community. Like, you know, and again, I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to name any whatchamacallits, and, you know, all opinions my own, but obviously I do work for a place that I need to be conscious of. But like, you know, you can appoint as many trans officials to the government as you want, but like an oppressive government structure is still an oppressive government structure. And, you know, more often than not, those types of things are held up as signs that things can't be too bad, or, you know, ways to make us feel ungrateful. And, you know, I think that to take it back into comics, like thinking about the narrative of Inferno and of Mystique's like journey through Inferno, it's really one of like emboldening minorities. Like when you kind of frame it in this way, like yeah, the whole point is if you're not being given what you're asking for, and what you're asking for is entirely reasonable, and the people within your power are withholding it and you don't know why, like, hey, the end of this is only going to turn into a fight anyway, so you might as well strike first. Like they're never going to play by your terms, so don't play by theirs. And like that's a lesson that I've been thinking through a lot lately, like as more and more legislation comes up, as more and more like community events are being like attacked by bigots. It's like, yeah, like what is an assimilationist politic gonna really get us in the trans community? Like we when we're trying to play by their terms, we're just still losing. So we might as well lose with, you know, a Molotov cocktail in our hands, for example, or you know, throwing dynamite at the institutions. Metaphorically, obviously, I would never publicly endorse any sort of violent activities.
I think that there's a piece of the Krakoan narrative that is cool applied to this conversation as well. Like obviously a lot of the Krakoan narrative revolves around the hubris of like Charles's secret plan with the council and everything. But I think that there is also something beautiful that they did with Krakoa, which was this idea of embracing your monsters. That like in respectability politics with trans people, there is often a desire to kind of cleave off the people who are the least likely to be successfully assimilated into society, because, you know, we can get further if we don't have to deal with the freaks or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that any amount of assimilation or acceptability in a society that is inherently transphobic is temporary. It's whatever is useful to the powers that be to temporarily quiet one group while they continue to consolidate their power. Charles. So, but I do think that there is something really beautiful that they explored in the like Krakoa era, which was like, how do we start from the place of like, this is a place for mutants first. This is a place for all of the freaks, for all of the weirdos. Everyone's got a complicated history and has been through trauma and suffering and has lashed out and has made mistakes. So we're going to start from a position of, you know, all of us together. We are going to defend each and every one of us, regardless of how marginalized or regardless of how guilty and, you know, complex their history is. So we'll start there. And then we'll move from there to a place towards justice.
Yeah, it's something that it's what Hoxpox, it's the hook that Hoxpox had that like really got me back in, because after the faded Rosenberg run, I was just like, I'm not reading fucking X-Men comics anymore. Like they let this dude step up and just take a deep fiery shit on everything I enjoyed about these books, and not even written particularly well. What's up, Matt? But like, you know, I was turned off, and then I had seen a panel go around of when that conversation between Cyclops and I think it's Sue Storm, and he was just like, how much longer did y'all think we were gonna just like keep turning the other cheek? And I was like, holy shit, we're finally going there with the X-Men. Like we're going to talk about like queer separatism, like minority separatist movements, finally. And it really has been interesting to see that shift and evolve and, you know, be re-examined. Like I have not read anything from the mainline title in like a year and a half, but I've read all of Sabretooth, and like Sabretooth is and I mean this in the best way possible, but it is like the equivalent of like the Twitter threads that were going around during Dawn of X, where people were like, hey, why isn't anyone paying attention to like the fact that they have like a fucking prison on this island, or like these types of things? And it's like, you know, and I've started to think about that story in terms of like intra-community conflict, where like, you know, where we have these moments of inconsistency between like our culture and our like moral narrative. Like the moral narrative of Krakoa is, you know, yes, we are a place for all mutants, regardless of whether or not they're apparently, you know, former Nazis. That one seems to be unaddressed currently by the X office, unfortunately. Maybe we should make an omission for genocidal scientists, and, you know, maybe they shouldn't get the pass, but also, you know, who are the people that this community still doesn't view as whole? Like, who are the people that Krakoa finds to be disposable? And how do they, how have they internalized those carceral frameworks from, you know, the quote unquote human world? And like reading through Sabretooth has just been really interesting to see the way that like there are so many parallels between that and the way that like inter-community conflict gets resolved, where like we are all using so much of the internalized narrative we have about how to resolve conflict or how to respond to conflict, that we are, when we carve out our own spaces, we often reenact some form of our own oppression. And so like, you know, there are no prisons on Krakoa, but we do have this giant pit that we're going to throw you in. You will never see anyone else. It does qualify as torture technically. And like, yeah, just it's really interesting when it starts to get on that level with the mutant metaphor. And I think it's where the mutant metaphor's ability to speak to the experiences of minorities is as powerful as its inability to do that. Because, you know, we don't have the benefit of going to our own island. We have the benefit of carving out, you know, Thursday nights at a rec center for an hour and a half once a month, or we have Discord servers, but, you know, only limited, and they're invaded by fascists regularly. And I think it's something that I was really excited about, and I haven't seen as much of an exploration of trans people, like just actual trans people, enough to really keep me hooked. And then they got me back in with Escapade, and now I'm
That's
eating
what I was
all
gonna say.
of my words.
That's what I was gonna say, that Escapade's mentor is Emma. There's a storyline there. We'll see how far they get, but there's a storyline there, and we all know it.
Well, they also.
But I think.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, there is a line in that story. We don't see where the word bubble comes from, but there is a line early on where they're sitting down, and the line is like something. We're trans women. Something is what we do, and it's like, okay, all right, I see what you're doing here. Like, not like, first off, either way, they're referring to a collective of we and defined as trans women. But if Emma is saying that, then like, I'm so appreciative for what that story did, because it's a line like that that is so easy to then play. You know, it's easy to start passing off that baton, where, you know, trans character deniably could be saying that and not Emma, but also the next person who comes on can start nudging that a little bit further. And it's, yeah, like you said, it's made all the more potent by the fact that like the trans woman headcanon of the X-Men, Emma Frost, is this trans girl's mentor. And just like, I mean, the amount of Jesse Drake fan fictions I've written in my head about that exact type of story is just buck wild.
I haven't read any of that stuff yet, and now I'm very excited to go and read it.
Yeah, I think there's something very interesting in how like Escapade like doesn't idolize Emma Frost either. Like she's very like ambivalent about the idea of going to Krakoa. She's like, I don't know about you guys, but like I do really like that to have Emma Frost as the mentor for her. I think it reminds me a bit of like Quentin Quire, like how Quentin was like challenging authority with like all these new ideas. I think maybe Escapade will do the same.
As a person who would never move to Krakoa, not even if they paid me, because it's terrifying. It did what everybody was saying just now really reminded me of my favorite queer Betsy story, which nobody read, which was in Hell's Angel, Dark Angel, which was a Marvel UK series. Siobhan takes Betsy away from the X-Men for like a 3-day date that Betsy doesn't really realize is a date. They just happen to be together for 3 days, and they crash in the same bed, and they wake up again, and they go out again, and they crash again. But her point is that you need to get away from the X-Men bullshit, which is really the Charles Xavier bullshit. And Krakoa, all of the Krakoa titles, I felt really pushed out of all of them at the beginning, and then New Mutants pulled me in when they got a new writer, because they all privileged a certain type of white guy. The genocidal conquering guy. Every title, Sebastian Shaw had no money, no power, nobody likes him. He's just a crappy rapist who everybody should forget. And they're like, well, what if we gave him some more money and some more power? That would be revolutionary. Like, that was the Krakoa revolution, was what if we gave white rapey guys more money? What if we gave the Nazi guy more money, more power? And that locked me out so much. But the idea that you could pull away, I can see using Emma for that. I can see using certain characters to pull away from that. I'm shocked that there wasn't more done with like Storm or somebody during that first year, second year, other than, well, we can knock her into a coma for a while, because that's a way to pull out of that. But Krakoa feels like I remember being young and in LA and queer, and there were definitely clubs or cafes. Like, there was a cafe called The Coffee Shop, and you couldn't go in the coffee shop if you weren't white enough, period. You just couldn't. They wouldn't serve you. They would ignore you. And there was a whole protest out front, and they called the cops on the protest out front. And that's what Krakoa feels like. It feels like they've made a safe space that's still not quite safe for some people, but they're totally going to let the white rapist in. That's fine. Which complicates things with Sabretooth for me, and I know people love that series, and I thought it was well written, but I'll never quite get over. I mean, Sabretooth is a rapist who eats people. Like, I'll never quite get over that part of it and be like, oh, well, we definitely, he should be the criminal we focus on as being unfairly treated.
We'll do a show about Sabretooth in the future, because that has to be its own show, because like there's arguments on why Sabretooth had to be the one to be thrown there, because he's not like a modelic prisoner.
I will say, though, it's interesting to look at, like, I don't know, I'm obsessed about Sabretooth because it's a story that, for me, not the character Sabretooth, the recent mini, because I do feel like sometimes the writing is not about the character. Like, he is a substrate for Victor to say something, or Victor LaValle to say something that is like more broadly about the culture, and Sabretooth happens to be the the most like notable victim of it so far.
Right. He's already been imprisoned in the X-Mansion basement for months and months at a time, right? It's like a meme at this point.
Yeah, he's been subjected to the worst interpretations of transformative justice I've ever seen in comics, where, like, Charles walks up, he's like, no. Like, we don't dispose of our community. We just brainwash them, keep them in the basement. We let Wolverine kind of threaten him every single fucking day. But this is what's going to fix Sabretooth. And shockingly, that ends up being a recipe for escalation of behavior, because Charles Xavier is not a practicing mental health professional. He is just a dipshit with mind powers. And so
jerk. He's a jerk.
Yeah, but I do feel those tensions too, because it's like, well, I mean, it's also like one of the biggest like abolitionist like debating points is like, what do you do with your abusers? What do you do with how do you respond to what I'll just sort of broadly define as like intimate partner violence? Like, what do you do in those spaces? And I think that there are way better people to answer that question, but it's enticing to think about the X-Men exploring that.
Yeah.
But I can't think of a writer who would be able to. And I also think that this is a Disney thing. Like, like so much of House of X and Powers of 10 in setting up Krakoa was, like we Googled the concepts of transformative justice, and then we figured like how much of that Disney can actually handle. And then let's just do that. Oh, it's about like bad guys can be good now. Okay, that's fine. And that we don't need to do any like reading on like what the actual systems for transformative justice look like, and how you are supposed to guide community healing. No, let's just put Sebastian Shaw on the fucking council with Emma Frost. And it's also like it's interesting to just look at Krakoa as a metaphor for like the Pride movement, where like, it has this radical potentiality at its roots, and then over time, like a bunch of white guys formed an elite governing body to determine it, and it's now this like sanitized thing. There are like corporations, like literally X Corp is about like rainbow capitalism. Like the problem isn't capitalism. The problem isn't like capitalist exploitation. It's just that the straights are doing it. And so if we can do it, like obviously gay capitalism will be better than straight capitalism because it's just that they weren't doing it correctly. And it's like, I don't know, like when I read X Corp, it was the funniest thing because I was like, exactly what I thought it would deal with. It did deal with it, but not in the way that I wanted it to, where it was just like, here's a bunch of minorities exploring what it's like if they had the boot on somebody else's face.
I do want to give Hickman a little bit of credit because I do feel I didn't love X Corp. I do feel like a lot of these themes that we're picking at are intentional aspects of a bit of a cautionary tale. Like, yes. I see a little bit of a like a mirror to like Ursula K. Le Guin's no, not Left Hand of Darkness, the Anaris story, The Dispossessed, where like you get a utopia. Like, look, we got a utopia. That was several generations ago. Now it's been a little while, and the utopian concepts have become dogma, and now the society is beginning to chafe against it. I feel like there's a little bit of that, like, here's this great utopian experiment, and then we're going to sow the seeds of its own destruction from the very beginning, and we're going to kind of walk you along with that process as it starts to unravel. I was also thinking a lot about, I don't think that you've read it. I don't know. Have any of you read the I think it might be becoming X-Men Green, but they've been X-Men Unlimited stories in Marvel Unlimited. So the like vertical scroll.
Yeah, the one with Nature Girl.
Yes. So thinking about carceral punishment in the like Krakoan landscape. So this obviously Sabretooth goes into that a lot, but this line of X-Men Unlimited stories goes into it even more, where you've got Nature Girl and Curse and Sauron who have teamed up to become eco-terrorists in defense, like no compromise in defense of Mother Earth. They have gone out to leave a swath of destruction and murder in order to prevent like the escalating climate crisis. And then all of a sudden the X-Men are in this position of being like, well, we tried to put them in prison forever because they can't be trusted. Nature Girl keeps killing people because she's upset that we're murdering the planet. Makes sense. Curse is just Curse and cannot be stopped from being a like evil munchkin. I don't think I think they met Sauron somewhere along the way to go cause trouble. But like, here are these undesirables that we're going to keep in a pit forever, and then they escape and go off to like go on this like righteous rampage. That is it's a cautionary tale about carceral, like our society's like approach to carceral punishment, and it's also a little bit of a cautionary tale around like revolutionary struggle and like the of course we're seeing these characters as like murderers, and they're doing legitimately reprehensible things, and so it has to sort of like exist in this dialogue between like, it's good to try and save the planet, it's probably bad to mass murder people, And I think that it's been really interesting, and I'm really glad. I want to high five. I forget who the writers are on this particular series, but I want to high five the writers for like giving my like 18-year-old aspiring eco-terrorist self like heroes to look up to, even though they're definitely the villains of this story.
Yeah, it was initially Jerry Duggan, and then Carla Pacheco wrote, I think, 5 issues of it. But yeah, with that story, I think the like eco-terrorism part, or just like the environmental concerns that are brought up in it, like the handling of that part is not that interesting to me. Like it just doesn't feel like I've just like I've read better like fiction that like
Yeah.
investigates like climate and stuff. But like the thing that really interests me is Curse, and it's just like her character and like how she feels like she has no other choice but to like do these awful things. So she's like, I might as well do awful things for like a righteous cause with people that like believe in me and care about me. And it feels a lot of just like this character who like her society has sort of neglected her, or like doesn't give her the care she needs, like because she's too scary, which kind of like Krakoa is supposed to be the opposite of that. But like this like young girl, like 12-ish, I think, she like gets lost in the cracks. And so just like what happens when like you do that kind of neglect. I just have a very soft spot for her. I hope she goes on to do great things.
Yeah, you can rehabilitate Mr. Sinister, but you can't rehabilitate this 12-year-old with an inconvenient power set.
I just think Krakoa would be very different if the government had been Callisto and Amelia Voigt and what's her name who made the Magneto clone? Like all the women who are like adult Charles Xavier aged women who got pushed out or disenfranchised and are never invited to the table that way. You'd have a very different culture. Astra, yes, Astra.
Basically, anyone who would think that hiring Beast to enforce
Anything.
security would be a bad idea, I think.
Hiring Beast for anything.
Yeah.
Famous paragon of ethics. Beast.
Okay. Before I ask, because now I have to ask our usuals, I have to ask Travis and Gabriel and Seal, but I want to give, because I don't know how much longer you're going to stay, Kat, and I want you to, just in case you have something to add, I want to give my queer awakening. I'll talk about the headcanon later. But my queer awakening storyline, which for me, and this is a weird choice, it's not really like technically a queer awakening because the character was queer before and after. It's technically the first issue in which is clear that this character is queer. So that counts in some way. And it kind of implies the queerness of another character, and it's Marvel Fanfare number 40, in which a Storm goes to Mystique to ask for help with the whole thing of like what, if I remember correctly, Forge made the thing to like take away the powers of someone, and Storm wanted to save Rogue and goes to Mystique to a bar. So like the story occurs in a like a BDSM bar in which like people are like flirting and fucking and all that stuff, and Mystique is over there, and it pretty much feels like a queer awakening story to me because it's the first times that we hear the internal voice of Mystique explaining how she enjoys changing forms and how she enjoys being different people in different moments. It's also the first story in which Mystique calls Destiny explicitly love, and even though Mystique is in male form, they dance and they have like this moment which is truly romantic. It can't be interpreted other way. Even if some people didn't consider that a confirmation, it's pretty much a confirmation. So I love that one specifically. in one way, because as you all were talking, as Kat was talking before, Mystique is a really interesting character for exploring trans, both allegories and probably some trans real stuff, because we don't know Mystique's assigned gender. That's something that we don't know. There's a lot of implications over there. We have a whole show about that. So if you want to listen to that Mystique show, it's there. And also, I like a lot that Mystique is like facing a storm, facing Ororo. And Raven and Ororo are having like different thoughts about how they relate to the situation. And there's a strong implication that what Mystique has, or what Mystique is capable of doing, or the ways she's capable of moving through the world, because the one's pointing which she turns into Ororo, is something that Ororo has not yet been able to reveal of herself or to explore within herself. And I like that. I really like that, because I feel like it's kind of a queer awakening for Ororo. If it ever comes to more, I'm pretty sure people will look back at that issue. Not only to the Batch Cat, but at that issue in particular. So I wanted to like bring that to the table, because I got reminded of that a lot when Kat was talking about like trans Mystique and all of that.
Yeah, the sapphic dynamics of that story are so wild, because it's like they're talking about I think Rogue having been depowered, or no, Storm being depowered.
Yeah,
or...
it's because that's what's gonna happen. This issue occurs before Storm is the power, and it's Mystique deciding to not warn Storm because she wants to save Rogue. So
and so it is sort of because like Rogue is Mystique's daughter, but like they're in the issue where like Storm gets depowered, like the interaction between her and Rogue, it has like a sort of like flirtatious dynamic where it is very much like Storm sort of like seducing Rogue into like touching her so that she can get her powers drained or something. So there is sort of that feeling of like Mystique being like, oh, I see you're into my daughter. But then there is also like a level, it seems like Mystique is herself trying to flirt with Storm a little bit, or like just sort of like detecting her queerness and like trying. I feel like when she shapeshifts like to resemble her, like I feel like she is also trying to like show her queerness or something. And then like Mystique goes back with her wife Destiny and they have their little dance, and it's just like all these things happening. It's a good story. I haven't read it in a little while, but it's good.
Yeah, that's my favorite Queer Awakening one. It's definitely not like a super orthodox Queer Awakening, but I'm taking it as mine because it definitely is the first story in which we hear on Mystique about gender, and it's the first story in which we see Mystique and Destiny together. It has a lot of first, and it also has that dynamic between Mystique and Storm that I really, really wish that whenever we finally get a queer Storm confirmed, that's gonna happen. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but it's definitely gonna happen. And put it in the world. I'm manifesting it. But whenever we get that, I hope that people read back at that story with like more curiosity, because it has a lot of like recognition and like
yeah,
there's a lot in that story and how it represents Mystique and Destiny's relationship. Like there's a lot of like trans or like genderqueer subtext with Mystique, but then also in that relationship I feel like there's kind of like a butch femme thing going on in how Mystique like shapeshifts into a man, and it's like it's a couple that like looks heterosexual but like isn't, and I think that is really interesting and sort of like alludes to like that butch femme history, and so I think that's neat.
Yeah,
that's very neat. No need for a
yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking really briefly about the like contrasting Mystique and then Megan from Excalibur, and how like there's this kind of potential. They're kind of opposites in this interesting way, where like Megan shapeshifts to, or like metamorphizes in response to other people's desires in this way that is non-consensual. Like she moves through the world and cannot help but embody whatever it is that you desire, and she feels really like caught in that. And that's a really fun and interesting analysis of femininity and what it means to move through the world as a woman, trying to like be safe and like give people what they want so they'll leave you the fuck alone. And I think that it's really interesting contrasted to Mystique, who has the opposite of that, where she can change into whatever you want, but she has all the agency. She has all the power in the situation. She uses it as a tool of manipulation in the context of, you know, Marvel history, mostly as an antagonist, moving the plot along to like fuck with things. But in her own personal life, potentially as this like great source of, you know, gender euphoria, or just like being a great partner to your person who like wants some dick sometimes, right? Like you just get to like, she gets to embody everything that people want, and do it on her own terms with her own power. And I find that's a very interesting narrative place.
Yeah. And also it doesn't escape to me that, and I'm just putting it out there, I'm not making it a headcanon, but I'm just putting it out there that a lot of people wanted to cast Dominic Jackson as a Storm. And it would be amazing to have a black trans woman play Storm in a movie. That, just putting it out there.
That role alive, like, yeah, amazing. Yeah. She would be so good.
Yeah. Anyway, after this,
I should go.
Oh yeah, just go. Okay, if you want.
Yeah, no, I should get on to some other stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all so very, very much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Watching you all soon, and maybe joining you all again someday soon.
Yes, of course. We're counting on you for the next season.
All my love. Be gay, do crimes.
Okay, so we have 3 people more to ask. Who should I go with first? Sil?
Sure. Yeah. So queer headcanon, I think you can probably guess. Yeah,
we have a whole show about that.
Yeah, I just very strongly think Jubilee should be a lesbian. It's very important to me, and also it just feels like it fits with her character very well. I honestly don't know like what I can say that I haven't like already said on this show before, but I think she, in the Exterminator series, I think that she and Laura should go dancing, and then they should kiss.
If Leah William ever listens to this,
if you're out there, for queer awakenings, I'm gonna mention a character that no one else has brought up yet, who is Marrow. Her queerness and how that is depicted in the comics is like really important to me. She in the 90s like is written very subtextually queer, like where it's like they don't say it but they show it, like they do basically everything except say it. So it's like because they don't say it, there's not like a formal like coming out, but there's this one scene in like Uncanny 361 or something where it's like Marrow is she's living in the X Mansion. She's like a part of the team, like a new recruit, and she is kind of she's sort of like hidden away in her own little corner. And like Colossus is like trying to become friends with her, and he like he like approaches her little like area without her notice, and then she suddenly notices him and she's like, oh, like don't look at this, and like all on her walls she's like has these pictures of like beautiful women taped up to her wall, and she's like very embarrassed of him seeing that, and she's like mad at him. And that just like that scene just sort of like it just had like such an impact on me, just like the shame she feels, but like also that it is so important to her that it's something that she can't hide, and just the way that like it's these beautiful women who's like she's admiring their images, and like it's not just because she's attracted to them, but also because like she herself doesn't look like them, and like she has this like intense envy of their appearance, and like what that the kind of privilege that they are able to attain because of the way they look. And it's just like reflected back at me like everything that I have felt as like a lesbian woman of color. It was something that like resonated really strongly with me. So like that interpretation of Marrow as queer is very important to me. I think these very messy depictions of like queerness and like people who are not comfortable with their identity and like with the emotions they're experiencing, like it's very important to me just because like that is how it feels sometimes. Like I love to see the more happier stories, like the one where like Karma finally like she kisses that girl in the Pride issue, and that's like very sweet. Like I love to see that kind of thing, but I also like to see the ones where like someone is like very much like struggling with who they are, and it's like it's not pretty, but it's very real.
Yeah, the scene with Marrow, it's very much a very unique queer experience of do I want them or do I want to be them, that I think every queer person has experienced at some point. And the answer is yes to all of the above a lot of the time. And I think it's just an inherently queer experience.
Yeah, and for Marrow, like within that question, there is also like a rage and like a frustration that like her life has been horrible because she did not look like that, and like also like it's like what does that mean for her like being attracted to those people, like how does that like interact with her beliefs and like her rage. It's interesting to me, but yeah, it is like a very common thing. I feel like with Jean and Emma, I feel like that is also there.
I think it would be really healthy for Marrow and Stacy X to spend some time together just making fun of all of the other X-Men.
Spend some time together in quotes, right? We want them to spend
Usually,
some time
yes.
together.
Yeah.
On that note, I have to run because I got something to do. But it was lovely talking to
It
y'all.
was lovely to
Thank you.
have you. Always.
Yep. Have a good night. Stay safe. Piss off a straight person.
Always.
On our way.
All right, y'all have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so 2 down. Gabriel, I'm gonna ask you first because your hand cannon is my favorite one.
So my headcanon, I spoke to Duna about it earlier. It's kind of almost a reverse queer headcanon, and that is that Samuel Guthrie Cannonball is straight, and he is the only straight member of New Mutants ever. I can make an argument for pretty much every New Mutant member, and in my headcanon, it is in the New Mutant bylaws that you cannot join the New Mutants unless you are queer or Sam. And Sam is just the token ally, and they do not need any more. And like you have Warpath joining New Mutants now, and that is Warpath coming out. He has the shorts to prove it, and every member of the New Mutants, except Sam, is queer, and that is my headcanon.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the perfect headcanon. I think we should do a show just about this headcanon, going over each one of the characters and exactly why they're queer. And in my ideal version of this show, I will have the panels ready, and I will just share the panels on the screen, and it would be just a bunch of like New Mutants holding hands, and Rhayne and Danny holding hands, and then those panels with Shiana and Danny, and then all of that.
You have to give me warning when you're going to do the show, though, because I have to collect screens and get my comics out. So every time we talk about it, I can show a page or a panel of Sam in some homoerotic situation.
Yeah, I gotta say that the whole Sam is straight thing is a tough sell.
Okay, you see, but for me, Sam is that straight friend that is fully aware about how much Roberto is into him, but is okay with it because he is comfortable with himself. So Roberto has been head over lust for Sam since day one, but Sam knows this and is okay with this because Roberto's his buddy. But he's the token straight white guy who, aside from that one weird scene, is okay and the most supportive ally he could be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Sam has some dresses in his closet and they're not his sister's.
I'm gonna say, like, we're sorry to be Samberto fans. As a podcast, we have to apologize. I feel responsible.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Sam is straight, because if Sam is straight, then Roberto is just doomed, and I don't want that for him.
If Sam is straight, the world doesn't make real sense anymore. And
but you see, Roberto isn't doomed because not only is Roberto blatantly bisexual or pansexual, if you tell me that Roberto is not also poly and believes in various different types of love, and he is okay with a platonic life partner of Sam, I gotta call bull on that, because Roberto is just, let me love everyone in their own unique way. So it's not doomed, it's just not the way he initially thought his lifelong relationship with Sam was gonna go.
That is very sweet. It is very romantic. I still think in 20 years they're going to do Inferno again, and it's going to be Berto making sure that they bring back Sam.
Yeah, I feel like Sam is more married to Roberto than to his wife. Like, sorry, there's a panel in which
I have writing issues with that one, but that's a whole different show.
I do like the idea of like one of Sam's like many younger siblings is like maybe gay or something, and then he's a very supportive older brother about it. I think he would be a good supportive older brother ally.
And despite my headcanon being deep canon, my favorite awakening is extremely more recent, and that is Prodigy. And not his initial story where he just lip locks with Hulkling and he's like, oh, my powers made me gay. But the more recent Pride issue from last year, where he has that conversation with Tommy Speed about bisexuality, and that first time he realized he was bisexual, and how he sat down and he did research into bisexuality, and every response he was getting was that it needed to be this 50-50 split, which is such a common misconception about bisexuality, and him realizing over time that it didn't have to be that way, that the way he felt about both genders, about all genders, is something that makes him bisexual, and it isn't the way the internet told him it had to be. And it was only by experiencing that feeling that Kitty gets when she looks at Colossus and him realizing, oh shit, I have that feeling when I look at Colossus. And I felt that that was such an organic and unique way to do an awakening that is both relatable, but also it makes his powers an intrinsic part of it. And just also seeing bivisibility in a comic in this way that said that bisexuality doesn't have to be the way that media tells us or society tells us it has to be, it like just knocked me on my ass, because it's not something that is spoken about nearly anywhere enough, and it needs to be.
Yeah, the 2021 Marvel Pride issue has like so many great stories, but that one like really stands out. I think the part where he talks about how he did like internet research on like men who are bisexual, and like some papers claim that it wasn't even real. Like that is just like so horrifying, because like you know that it's true. Like I know that like Kieran Gillen is like writing that from experience. Like he is a bisexual man, and like obviously like his understanding of his sexuality is not the same as prodigies, because prodigy like figured it out with his mutant power, but it still is like there's that truth in it. And I love that it's prodigy's powers that help him figure out his sexuality, which like I think there needs to be more of that with the X-Men, because like otherwise what is the point of these like powers if it's not like deeply tied to like the character like figuring out their identity. And I don't know, I think there's so much about that comic that's really great. There's this one panel where he's like, if the X-Men were your teachers, like you would have a lot of feelings too. And it's like all these X-Men who like have been like very queer coded is the thing. Like it's Storm and I think like Nightcrawler and Jubilee and someone else, but it's like it does feel like very intentional that like these are like queer coded X-Men, but like because they're not like explicitly queer, is like Prodigy didn't have that model for his sexuality. Like he had to figure it out another way. I really liked the art in that story. I love the panel where he's sitting with Surge and he's like looking over at Colossus kind of nervously. And I think if you do like a bisexual reading of Kitty Pryde, then like the fact that it's like Kitty's feelings for Colossus that make him understand his own sexuality, I think there's something very touching about like him understanding his sexual orientation like through like another bisexual character's feelings for someone else. Like I think there's something like very touching there, and like shows the importance of like queer community. Um, it's one of my favorite. I just really like that story. But yeah, good choice.
Travis?
Okay. So I also misunderstood the second question, so we'll get to that when we get to it. As far as headcanon goes, I really wish proving an X person is queer was a party game, because I would be so good at it. I think they're all queer. I think you can prove, like in 2 to 3 steps, you can prove any X character is queer. My favorite of the moment right now is headcanon is Rogue. And it particularly ties to her solo. And I think Robert Rohde wrote this story with Blind Spot, who was in the story. It's very clear that this is Rogue's first girlfriend. It's her first real relationship. It is a young woman who lives with her and her mother's, and they are very close, and the parents are afraid they're getting too close. Blind Spot's power is that you're going to forget her. She is forgettable. And she knows that, and she feels the same sort of fear that Rogue has about touching people and about not being able to touch people, but in a different way. If she's not right next to you all the time, she's not in your memory at all. She's gone. And so in the story, Rogue meets up with her again as an adult, and things kind of flood back to them, and she remembers this, and they have these flashbacks of how they used to sit on the couch and hold hands or touch each other. And there's one scene where they have a crisis, but they're getting close to each other, and the Mystique shows up, and they're literally scissoring on the couch. That's how they've drawn them. Their legs are right up to the crotch. And it's obvious what's going on. It's written by a gay man. They knew what they were doing, but they don't say it. They don't say the words. And at the end of the story, because Rogue knows she's going to forget Blind Spot, and Blind Spot feels it's the best thing for you. You've got Gambit, you've got your life and everything. Rogue gives her her costume so that she can take her costume home with her and always have it. And they show her sleeping with the costume. And I'm like, that's just the sweetest thing. That's the nicest thing. That's like the nicest queer thing I've seen in an X comic in a lot of ways. And so I maintain that headcanon, which is not really a headcanon, but it has to be because they don't say the words. So that's my favorite X-Men queer headcanon at this moment. As far as like a queer awakening or a queer coming out, I misunderstood it. So I had a whole thing prepared, which I'll get to. But I really like, I got to think of her name again now, Bling. And Bling already knows she's gay. She's not really having an awakening, but she has to keep coming out to characters because the characters don't assume that she's gay. And so I like that. I like that she comes out forthright. Looking back recently, I was shocked to realize she's probably the first character in an X book to say it in a way that is obvious. She doesn't say the word lesbian, which is disappointing, but she says, you're the one that makes my heart flutter. I'm attracted to you. And we don't have that. Even with characters like Karma up to that point, they'd been, it's their hair is dyed and they live with two other women. And that's the closest they can come to saying gay. It's really weird.
Bring polyamorous Karma back.
And it was this weird kind of realization that she's the first one to just be like, no, I'm really into you. And I'm really into you. And the two that she's really into are Mystique and Rogue. And what I love too is with Rogue, when they finally have a scene together, Rogue is convinced that she's into Gambit and she's dressing like Rogue. She's copying Rogue's body language. She's so flustered and uncertain. And then when Rogue gets mad at her, she's like, I think I have to leave the X Mansion. Like she has to leave school because her crush is mad at her. And
I think she makes a comment about like wanting to be held in Rogue's womanly arms or something.
Yes,
I thought that was so cute.
It's really sweet. And I love her having to keep coming out and keep establishing things. There's Onyx there who kind of comes on to her and she has to blow him off, and then he tries to assault Mystique later and then disappears. So I'm glad he disappeared. But her coming out to different women, or at least positive in that way, there's less threat there than when she has to come out to the guy.
I also do love with Bling how she is only into either heavily queer-coded characters like Rogue, like Jubilee, or characters that are actually queer, like Mystique or Mercury or Loa, and how she doesn't crush on like really straight girls.
Yeah.
And I think that's good to see.
Yeah.
And what I thought it meant, of course, was I thought you meant our queer awakening through X books, what book tipped us off or what character tipped us off. And so I have to say Peter Gillis's New Defenders, which was an X book. It was, funded by Angel. It had 3 of the founding X-Men in there. It was such an X book. And when I was a very young child and going through surgeries for intersex stuff, among other things, that was a comic that really helped me to understand a lot of what I felt and a lot of what I was going through. Because they're going in for surgeries, they're going in, they're cutting up your genitals and everything. And you're like 7 years old, 6 years old. What the hell does that mean? What does that imply? And that was a run where anytime somebody got upset at Cloud for not being a boy or a girl, or being a boy at the right time or a girl at the right time, it changed character to character, but somebody always spoke up for Cloud and made it that person's issue. If Bobby was having the issue, it's Bobby's issue. If Moondragon was having the issue, it's Moondragon's issue. They can deal with their own shit on their own time. Don't put it on somebody because they made you uncomfortable or they made you uncertain about something. When Bobby pretends to be Beast's boyfriend in that run, and Beast gets upset, it's presented as Beast being uptight. It's not Bobby's fault even for making the joke or whatever. It's Beast trying to be the respectable mutant and do these public lectures and these public things where he's the good mutant. Don't say I'm gay kind of thing. And that really had an effect on me in those years that I don't know other media would have. I can't think of any other like TV show or even another comic that was aimed at all ages or aimed at kids that really would have given me that understanding.
Yeah, and something so important with Cloud is that like even when the characters are like confused by Cloud's gender, like they always stand up for Cloud and like they're very supportive of Cloud. So I don't know what pronouns Cloud uses these days. Is it they them?
I think it is they them now in the current Ewing series.
Yeah, so like they're like always very supportive of them, and that I think is so important to see. Like I feel like they're in that time, like in the 80s, like any like sort of like queer representation, it was always very like problematic, and like this one also like it has like its issues, but it just the way that it is very dedicated to like being very positive about this character is really important, I think.
Not to jump off topic a little bit, you said Cloud is back?
Yes.
Oh snap.
They were in Al Ewing's Defenders series. I don't know if they're in the new one, but it was a pretty recent 5-issue series. I have not read it yet, but I would like look at it at the comic store and flip through the pages, and the art looks really cool. So take
it has
that.
Galactus's mom as a main character, and she comes off very queer.
Who was that?
Galactus.
Oh.
It has Galactus's mom in it. She comes off very queer. She's a quintessential Kirby, kind of the big boisterous Kirby woman. Comes off very, yeah.
Galactus's mom is queer is not the where I thought this show was going to go. I'm here for it, but I gotta say that was unexpected.
So I guess it's only me and my headcanon now. Because I haven't saved my headcanon.
Yeah.
This is such a difficult choice. I have been like pondering it for a whole while because like obviously I have a soft spot for Illyana, but so many people have talked about Illyana so far. I feel like they have defended her enough, and I particularly love one fanfic in which she is involved with Leah of Hell. Search for it; it's amazing. But now I'm gonna taking advantage of what is happening in Krakoa and how it's like shaping differently the society and etc. I would love to have Rhayne and Danny confirm at least, and Danny and Xian, and she and Angalora, which is already confirmed. That's just a new character. So they are like all of them all together, or like more like this one with this one with this one with it. More like a line.
It goes further though, because you also got Shan and Kitty and Rachel and Betsy,
Oh,
and it's
and
just
Rachel
like
and Betsy.
a whole
Yes.
lesbian.
Okay, so what I want
Alexis
is
and Daisy chain.
so what I want is for all the lesbians to be with each other. Like, thank you, Gabriel. You just channel my
You know what?
inner thoughts.
They have all those different, what are they called, like pods or the habitats on Krakoa.
Yes.
I think they just need to have like the
I
sapphic
just-
pod where all these women who have had these moments in the Claremont era till today just move in together and
Yeah,
Playhouse.
we're gonna Dazzler to that, and well, anyway. So my whole thing is I want a lot of the lesbian drama in the books. That's my headcanon. I want them to have relationships that are intense and that are depicted on the page and have talks and things that superhero comics don't do a lot, but I want them anyway. And I want to get messy. So
Yeah.
Well, I do want to say before we close up, one thing I want to come back is the gayest thing about Ilyana, which is when she used to try to balance a pencil on her upper lip.
That was so cute.
That needs to come back.
yes,
I will consider that a canonization of her queerness.
Yeah.
Let me just say my New Mutants, the pairings that I want to see is Danny and Karma, obviously, and like I haven't been keeping up with New Mutants, but like maybe her winged girlfriend can be there too. And I also want to see Rhayne with Boom Boom, just because I think they would be really cute together. And I like I like that Rachel and Betsy got to have their kiss, but eventually what I want to see is Rachel with Monet, and I think Betsy could be with Domino. And that's my pitch.
I like that piece. I still want for Rhayne and Danny to have their moment because like they've been it's been long overdue. Like it's even in a movie. Like, we have it in a terrible movie. I still haven't watched that movie. It's even in a movie. Like we're like 5 years from now, we're gonna do a show, and I'm gonna be like, I still haven't watched that movie.
One of these days, I'm going to learn how to edit video so I can cut out everything from that movie except for the lesbians. And it will just be like a 30-minute short lesbian film.
Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah.
I'm so taken with that Hell's Angel thing with Betsy. That I just, when they kissed, when Rachel and her kissed, all I could think of was Siobhan is somewhere just like so happy for the two of them. Because she spent like 3 whole days trying to get Betsy to relax and remember what life is like and partying is like and being cool is like, and being cool is being queer. That's what that means. And so I'm so happy about that kiss.
Best way to close the show. This is gonna be our last show for a while. I think we're gonna be back either in September or October, depends on how we organize things. And yeah, whenever we feel like it. Because neither I nor Gabriel are very organized people, so like ADHD. So like anyway, thank you for coming, to all of you, and obviously to all of the other people that are not here anymore to hear thank you. We're gonna be releasing some other cool stuff from here till there related to this show. And this was a celebration. This was the 50th show. We made it to here. I can't wait. We made it to the 100th one. And I'm not sure what we're going to do then. I'm not sure. Like, fly me to New York or something.
Yes.
Either way, I think that was it.